The rain hammered against the windshield of Marcus Thompson's pickup truck as he navigated the flooded streets of downtown Riverside at 2:47 in the morning. Water swirled around his tires, rising steadily as the storm that meteorologists had underestimated continued its relentless assault on the sleeping city. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, his calloused hands steady, despite the exhaustion that weighed on his shoulders like a lead blanket. He'd been working a double shift at the water treatment plant, ensuring the pumps kept running as the unprecedented rainfall threatened to overwhelm the city's drainage systems. In the passenger seat, his emergency radio crackled with increasingly desperate calls from first responders stretched beyond their limits. Marcus wasn't officially part of any rescue team. He was just a municipal worker trying to get home to his 8-year-old daughter Emma, who was staying with Mrs. Rodriguez next door while he worked through the emergency. But 20 years of living in Riverside had taught him every street, every low-lying area, every place where water liked to collect during heavy rains. And right now, his knowledge was telling him that the financial district, where glass towers reached toward the storm clouds, was about to become a death trap. The radio dispatcher's voice cut through the static with urgent clarity. All available units to Meridian Tower. We have reports of people trapped in the underground parking garage. Water level rising rapidly. Marcus knew Meridian Tower. It housed the regional headquarters of several major corporations, and its underground parking extended 3 levels below street level. During normal times, it was an engineering marvel. Tonight, it was becoming a tomb. He reached for his radio, hesitating for just a moment. He wasn't rescue personnel. He had no authority, no official standing. He was just Marcus Thompson, a single father who fixed water mains and cleared storm drains. A man whose greatest accomplishment was keeping his daughter's world stable after her mother had walked out 3 years ago. But as another call came through reporting that the main elevator was flooded and people were trapped on the lower levels, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He turned his truck toward downtown, pushing through water that was now reaching his door handles. The streets were empty, except for emergency vehicles, their red and blue lights reflecting off the black water like scattered jewels. As he approached Meridian Tower, he could see the scope of the disaster. The building's main level was still above water, but barely. Emergency vehicles clustered around the entrance, and he could see firefighters in water rescue gear preparing equipment. The underground parking garage had become a lake, and somewhere beneath that dark water, people were trapped. Marcus parked his truck on higher ground and approached the incident commander, a fire captain he recognized from community meetings. The man looked up as Marcus approached, water streaming from his rain gear. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I know this building's water systems," Marcus said simply. "Installed the emergency pumps 2 years ago during the renovation." The captain studied him for a moment, weighing options in the chaos surrounding them. "We've got at least 6 people trapped on level 2. The main stairwell is completely flooded. The emergency stairwell is our only way down, but we're dealing with electrical hazards, and the water's still rising." Marcus nodded, his mind already working through the building's layout. "There's a maintenance access from the mechanical room, leads directly to level 2. Water might not have reached it yet if the emergency pumps are still running." 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in chest-deep water, following a narrow concrete tunnel that most people didn't even know existed. He wore borrowed rescue gear that didn't quite fit, his movements careful and deliberate as he navigated by the beam of a waterproof flashlight. Behind him, 2 firefighters provided backup, but Marcus led the way through passages he'd helped design. The tunnel emerged into a maintenance area on level 2, where the water was only knee-deep but rising steadily. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the concrete walls, and the sound of rushing water echoed from somewhere deeper in the structure. Marcus could hear voices calling for help, and he followed the sound through a maze of parked cars that were slowly disappearing beneath the surface. He found them huddled on the roof of a large SUV, 3 adults and what appeared to be a child, all soaked and shivering in the emergency lighting. 2 men in expensive suits, a woman in business attire, and a small girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. As Marcus waded closer, he could see the terror in their eyes, the way they held on to each other with desperate strength. "How many of you?" Marcus called out, his voice carrying easily across the water. 4, one of the men replied. "We were working late when the water started coming in. The elevator stopped, and by the time we reached the stairwell, it was already flooded." Marcus assessed the situation quickly. The SUV they were standing on was stable for now, but the water was rising steadily. They had maybe 15 minutes before their refuge would be underwater. The emergency stairwell was their only viable exit, but it meant a dangerous wade through increasingly deep water. "I'm going to get you out of here," Marcus said, his voice calm and reassuring. "But I need you to listen carefully and do exactly what I say." The woman on the SUV looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Even in her waterlogged state, she carried herself with unmistakable authority, the kind of person accustomed to being in control. Her dark hair was plastered to her head, and her expensive suit was ruined, but her eyes remained sharp and assessing. "Who are you?" she asked. "Are you with the fire department?" "I'm the guy who's going to get you home to your families," Marcus replied simply. He gestured toward the child, who was clinging to the woman's hand. "Is she your daughter?" The woman nodded, pulling the little girl closer. "Yes, this is Sophie. We were at my office when the flooding started." Marcus studied the child, seeing his own Emma in her frightened face. The protective instinct that had driven every decision he'd made for the past 3 years flared to life. This little girl needed to get home safely, needed to wake up tomorrow in her own bed instead of becoming another tragic statistic. "Sophie," Marcus said, his voice gentle but confident. "I have a daughter about your age. Her name is Emma, and she's waiting for me at home right now. I promise you, I'm going to make sure you get home to your mom tonight." The rescue operation required 3 trips through the flooded tunnel. Marcus took the adults first, one at a time, guiding them through water that was now chest deep and growing more dangerous by the minute. Each journey was a carefully calculated risk, fighting against current that wanted to sweep them into deeper areas where the mechanical systems created hidden hazards. The woman, who had introduced herself only as Catherine, insisted on going last with her daughter. "I won't leave Sophie," she said firmly when Marcus suggested she go first. "We stay together." Marcus respected her decision, recognizing the fierce protectiveness of a parent who would face any danger for their child. When the time came for the final rescue, the water had risen to dangerous levels. Marcus knew this would be the most challenging extraction, carrying a 6-year-old through conditions that were testing the limits of adult endurance. "Sophie," Marcus said, kneeling in the water beside the SUV, "I need you to climb on my back and hold on tight. Can you do that for me?" The little girl nodded solemnly, her trust complete despite having known him for less than an hour. As she wrapped her small arms around his neck, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This child's life was now in his hands, and failure wasn't an option. The journey back through the tunnel seemed endless. Sophie's weight made navigation more difficult, and the rising water forced Marcus to occasionally lift her higher to keep her head above the surface. Behind them, Catherine followed with grim determination, her expensive shoes long since abandoned, her designer clothes reduced to waterlogged fabric that hindered her movement. "Almost there," Marcus murmured to Sophie as they neared the tunnel's exit. When they finally emerged into the mechanical room, safe hands reached out to help them to higher ground. Sophie was wrapped in emergency blankets while paramedics checked her for signs of hypothermia. Catherine, despite her own exhaustion and exposure, remained focused entirely on her daughter's well-being. As the immediate crisis passed and the rescued group was led to safety, Catherine approached Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. The emergency lighting cast harsh shadows on her face, but her eyes were steady and grateful. "Thank you," she said simply. "You saved our lives." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Just doing what anyone would do. Catherine's smile held a knowing quality. "No," she said quietly, "not anyone. What you did tonight required knowledge, courage, and skill that very few people possess." She paused, studying his face in the dim light. "I don't even know your name." "Marcus Thompson," he replied. "I work for the city. Water systems." Something flickered in Catherine's expression, as if she was filing away information for later consideration. "Well, Marcus Thompson, who works for the city, I owe you a debt I can never repay." As the rescue teams led them toward the exit, Marcus caught glimpses of Catherine's interaction with the emergency personnel. Despite her bedraggled appearance, she commanded immediate respect and attention. Officials who had been brusque with others spoke to her with deference. Phone calls were made, arrangements set in motion with an efficiency that spoke of significant influence. But what struck Marcus most was watching her with Sophie. The authoritative executive disappeared, replaced by a mother whose entire focus was her child's comfort and safety. She carried Sophie when the little girl's legs grew tired, whispered reassurances when the emergency vehicles, Sirens frightened her and never once complained about her own discomfort. By dawn, the immediate emergency had passed. The storm had moved on, leaving behind a city counting its losses and beginning the long process of recovery. Marcus finally made it home to find Emma awake and worried, despite Mrs. Rodriguez's best efforts to keep her calm. "Daddy!" Emma threw herself into his arms, not caring that his clothes were still damp and he smelled like floodwater. "Mrs. Rodriguez said there was bad flooding. I was scared something happened to you." Marcus held his daughter close, feeling the familiar surge of gratitude for her presence in his life. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I helped some people who were trapped by the water. Everyone's safe now." As Emma peppered him with questions about the rescue, Marcus found his thoughts returning to Catherine and Sophie. He wondered if they had family waiting for them, if someone had wrapped Sophie in warm blankets and made her hot chocolate, if Catherine had been able to put aside her executive persona long enough to process her own trauma from the night's events. 3 days later, Marcus was replacing a damaged pressure valve in the water treatment plant's main facility when his supervisor approached with an unusual expression. "Thompson, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about the flood rescue." Marcus looked up from his work, wrench still in hand. "Probably insurance or legal follow-up. I'll handle it." But when he reached the facility's main office, he found Catherine waiting for him. She looked different in daylight, her dark hair perfectly styled, wearing a tailored business suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. The transformation was striking, but her eyes remained the same, steady and intelligent, carrying warmth that hadn't been there when he'd first met her in the emergency lighting of the flooded parking garage. "Hello, Marcus," she said, rising from her chair as he entered the office. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to thank you properly for what you did." Marcus felt suddenly self-conscious about his work clothes, the grease under his fingernails, the way he probably smelled after spending the morning in the mechanical systems. "It's no problem. How's Sophie doing?" Catherine's smile was genuine and warm. "She's fine, completely recovered. She's been talking about the brave man who carried her through the water. She wanted to thank you herself, but she's in school." She paused, studying his face. "Marcus, I need to ask you something. The way you handled that rescue, your knowledge of the building systems, the calm way you took charge in a crisis situation. That's not typical for a municipal water worker." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, unsure where this conversation was leading. "I've been doing this job for a long time. You pick things up." "I did some research," Catherine continued, her voice gentle but persistent. "Your employment records show you've been with the city for 3 years. Before that, there's a gap. Military service, I'm guessing. Specialized training that prepared you for exactly the kind of situation we faced that night." The silence stretched between them as Marcus weighed his response. He'd worked hard to leave his past behind, to build a simple, stable life for Emma that didn't involve the complications of his previous career. "I was in the Army," he said finally. "Engineering Corps. Did my 8 years and got out when Emma's mother left. Figured she needed stability more than I needed adventure." Catherine nodded, as if this confirmed her suspicions. "Combat engineer. That explains the methodical approach. The way you assessed and managed multiple risk factors simultaneously." She leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, I have a proposition for you." Before Marcus could respond, his supervisor knocked on the office door. "Thompson, sorry to interrupt, but we've got a main break on 5th Street. Need you there in 20 minutes. Catherine stood as Marcus prepared to leave. "I'll make this quick. I'm offering you a job. Head of Security and Emergency Preparedness for my company. The salary is triple what you're making here. Full benefits, flexible schedule that would allow you to be there for Emma." Marcus stared at her, processing the unexpected offer. "What kind of company?" "Riverside Regional Development. We're behind most of the major construction projects in the area over the past 5 years, including Meridian Tower." The pieces fell into place in Marcus's mind. Catherine wasn't just a grateful flood victim. She was someone with real power, real resources, offering him an opportunity that could transform his and Emma's life. "I appreciate the offer," Marcus said carefully. "But I like my job here. It's steady, predictable. Emma needs that kind of stability." Catherine's expression showed understanding rather than disappointment. "I respect that. But Marcus, talents like yours shouldn't be hidden away in maintenance tunnels. You could make a real difference, help prevent future disasters, save more lives." She handed him a business card. "Think about it. The offer stands whenever you're ready." As Catherine prepared to leave, she turned back with a final thought. "Sophie asked me to tell you something. She said that when she grows up, she wants to help people like you helped her. That's the kind of impact you made on a 6-year-old girl who thought she was going to die that night." After she left, Marcus stood in the office holding her business card, reading the name printed in elegant script, Catherine Winters, CEO, Riverside Regional Development. Below it, a phone number and email address, and handwritten in neat script, "Heroes shouldn't work in the shadows." That evening, as Marcus helped Emma with her homework at their small kitchen table, she looked up from her math problems with curious eyes. "Dad, Mrs. Rodriguez said a fancy lady came to see you at work today. What did she want?" Marcus considered how to explain the encounter in terms an 8-year-old would understand. "Remember I told you about helping people during the flood? She was one of them. She wanted to thank me and offer me a different job." Emma's expression grew serious. "Would we have to move?" I don't know, sweetheart. It would be a big change." Emma nodded thoughtfully, then returned to her math problems. After a few minutes, she looked up again. "Dad, do you remember what Mom used to say about helping people?" "What did she say?" "She said that God gives people special gifts so they can help others. And if you hide your gifts, it's like keeping a light under a basket where nobody can see it." The simple wisdom of his daughter's memory hit Marcus harder than Catherine's sophisticated arguments had. Sarah had always believed that people had obligations that went beyond their own comfort and safety. She'd volunteered at the homeless shelter, organized neighborhood watch programs, and constantly pushed Marcus to think beyond his own immediate concerns. "Maybe you should help more people, Dad," Emma said quietly, focusing on her homework again. "If you can." That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus sat on his small back porch, looking up at stars that were finally visible after days of storm clouds. Catherine's business card lay on the table beside him, catching moonlight that made the elegant script seem to glow. He thought about the moment when Sophie had wrapped her arms around his neck, trusting him completely to carry her to safety. He thought about Catherine's determined face as she followed him through rising water, refusing to leave her daughter's side. He thought about Emma's innocent observation about not hiding lights under baskets. For 3 years, Marcus had chosen safety and predictability over the unknown. He'd built a quiet life that protected Emma from the uncertainties that had characterized his military career and the chaos that followed Sarah's departure. But as he sat in the darkness, he began to wonder if his desire to provide stability had actually been limiting the kind of life he could offer his daughter. The next morning brought news that made Marcus's decision easier. The flood damage assessment revealed systematic failures in the city's emergency response systems. Infrastructure that should have prevented the flooding had failed due to poor maintenance and outdated equipment. 3 people had died in other parts of the city, victims of negligence that better planning and preparation could have prevented. When Marcus arrived at work, he found his supervisor waiting with bad news. "Budget cuts. Thompson, we're looking at a 20% reduction in staff. You've got seniority, so your job is safe. But there'll be no overtime, no equipment upgrades, and definitely no raises for the foreseeable future." During his lunch break, Marcus called the number on Catherine's business card. Her assistant put him through immediately, as if she'd been expecting his call. "Marcus," Catherine's voice carried warmth and what sounded like relief. "I was hoping I'd hear from you." "I'd like to discuss your offer," Marcus said, "if it's still available." "Absolutely. Can you meet me this afternoon?" "I'd like to show you what we're working on." Catherine's office occupied the top floor of a modern building overlooking the area that had flooded 3 days earlier. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus could see the ongoing cleanup efforts, the damaged buildings, the lives and businesses affected by the disaster. "This is what we're trying to prevent," Catherine said, joining him at the window. "Better infrastructure, smarter planning, emergency systems that actually work when people need them." She led him to a conference table covered with architectural plans and engineering reports. "We're not just developers, Marcus. We're trying to build resilience into every project, to create structures and systems that protect people instead of putting them at risk." As Catherine explained her company's approach to sustainable development and emergency preparedness, Marcus realized this wasn't just a job offer. It was an opportunity to apply everything he'd learned in the military and in his years with the city to prevent future tragedies. "The position I'm offering you would involve reviewing all our projects for emergency preparedness, developing response protocols, and training our staff in crisis management." You'd also work with city planners and emergency services to improve regional disaster response. Marcus studied the plans spread across the table, recognizing flaws and opportunities that his experience had taught him to spot. What's the timeline for implementation? That depends partly on you, Catherine replied. We can move as fast as you're comfortable with. I know this represents a major change, and Emma's well-being has to be your first consideration. The mention of his daughter reminded Marcus of the careful balance he needed to maintain. I'd need guarantees about schedule flexibility. Emma comes first, always. Absolutely. In fact, that's part of why I want you for this position. Someone who understands the importance of protecting the people we care about will design better systems for protecting everyone. That evening, Marcus sat down with Emma to discuss the potential change. He explained the job offer in terms she could understand, emphasizing that it would mean more money for her education and extracurricular activities, but also acknowledging that it would involve new responsibilities and challenges. Would you still be helping people? Emma asked, cutting directly to what mattered most to her. Yes, but in a different way. Instead of fixing things after they break, I'd be working to prevent them from breaking in the first place. Emma considered this with 8-year-old seriousness. That sounds important, Dad. And the lady with the daughter, she seems nice. Marcus smiled at his daughter's assessment. She does seem nice. But this would be a big change for both of us. Mom always said that good changes are scary but worth it, Emma replied. And you could probably help more people. 2 weeks later, Marcus walked into Catherine's office for his first day as Director of Emergency Preparedness for Riverside Regional Development. The title felt strange and important, carrying weight that his previous job had never possessed. Catherine greeted him with a warm smile and a comprehensive orientation packet. Welcome to the team, Marcus. I think you're going to find this work both challenging and rewarding. The first project Catherine assigned him was a comprehensive review of the flood response failures that had led to the Meridian Tower incident. As Marcus dug into the documentation, he discovered a pattern of systematic neglect and poor planning that had made the disaster inevitable. The emergency pumps in the lower levels hadn't been serviced in 2 years, he reported to Catherine a week later. The drainage system was designed for storms half the intensity of what we experienced, and the evacuation protocols assumed the elevators would remain functional. Catherine listened intently as Marcus outlined his findings, taking notes and asking detailed questions that demonstrated her commitment to understanding the technical aspects of the problems they were trying to solve. What would you recommend to prevent this from happening again? Complete overhaul of the emergency systems, redundant pumping capacity, and secondary evacuation routes that don't depend on mechanical systems, Marcus replied. It'll be expensive, but much less expensive than dealing with another disaster. Catherine nodded, already calculating costs and implementation strategies. Make it happen, whatever resources you need. As Marcus began implementing his recommendations, he found himself working closely with Catherine on a daily basis. Despite her corporate position and obvious wealth, she proved to be surprisingly down-to-earth and genuinely committed to the safety improvements he proposed. She asked intelligent questions, challenged his assumptions when necessary, and supported his decisions even when they meant significant additional costs for her projects. You're different from what I expected, Marcus told her one afternoon as they reviewed plans for a new residential complex. How so? Catherine asked, looking up from the blueprints they'd been studying. Most executives I've worked with care more about budgets than safety. You seem to actually prioritize doing things right. Catherine's expression grew thoughtful. That night in the parking garage changed my perspective on a lot of things. When you're holding your child while water rises around you, profit margins seem less important than making sure something like that never happens to anyone else. Their working relationship gradually evolved into something approaching friendship. Catherine proved to be an attentive listener who remembered details about Emma's school activities and Marcus's concerns about single parenthood. Marcus found himself sharing stories about his military service and his struggles to build a stable life after Sarah's departure. You've done an extraordinary job with Emma, Catherine told him one evening as they finished reviewing emergency protocols for a new shopping center. She's confident, kind, and remarkably mature for her age. Marcus felt a familiar warmth at praise for his daughter. She's the best thing in my life. Everything I do is really for her. That shows, Catherine replied. But Marcus, you should also do things for yourself. You're allowed to have dreams and ambitions beyond just providing for Emma. The observation stayed with Marcus as he drove home that night. For 3 years, he defined himself entirely through his role as Emma's father, subsuming his own identity and aspirations to focus solely on her needs. But Catherine's gentle challenge made him wonder if his self-imposed limitations might actually be limiting the kind of father he could be. Emma seemed to sense the change in her father's outlook. "You seem happier lately, Dad," she observed one Saturday morning as they worked together in their small garden behind their rented house. "Do you like your new job?" Marcus considered the question as he helped Emma plant marigolds along the fence line. "I do like it. It feels like I'm making a real difference, using my skills for something important." "And you like working with Sophie's mom," Emma added with the perceptive directness that sometimes startled him. "Catherine is a good boss and a good friend," Marcus replied carefully. "She's very smart and cares about helping people." Emma nodded sagely. "She's pretty too. And Sophie is nice. Maybe we could have them over for dinner sometime." The suggestion caught Marcus off guard, though he realized it shouldn't have. Emma had always been socially intuitive, quick to extend friendship to people she liked. "That's a nice idea, sweetheart. I'll mention it to Catherine." 2 days later, Catherine accepted the dinner invitation with enthusiasm that seemed genuine rather than polite. "Sophie has been asking about Emma ever since I mentioned her," Catherine said. "She's excited to meet another girl her age." The dinner took place on a warm Saturday evening, in Marcus's small backyard. He grilled hamburgers while Emma and Sophie became fast friends, bonding over shared interests in art and animals. Catherine helped with side dishes, moving comfortably in his modest kitchen while maintaining the kind of conversation that made the evening feel natural rather than forced. "This is lovely," Catherine said as they sat around the picnic table Marcus had built the previous summer. "I can't remember the last time I had such a relaxed, enjoyable evening." Marcus watched Catherine interact with both girls, noting how naturally she engaged with their interests and concerns. Despite her obvious wealth and success, she seemed genuinely interested in Emma's school stories and Sophie's enthusiastic descriptions of her latest art projects. "Mom doesn't cook very much," Sophie confided to Emma as they shared dessert. "She's always working. But she makes really good pancakes on Sunday mornings." Catherine looked slightly embarrassed by her daughter's revelation. "I'm working on achieving better balance between career and family time." "Dad works a lot too," Emma replied loyally. "But he always makes time for important stuff." After dinner, the girls played in the backyard while Marcus and Catherine cleaned up. Working together in the kitchen felt comfortable and domestic in a way that Marcus hadn't experienced since Sarah's departure. "Thank you for including us tonight," Catherine said as she dried dishes. "Sophie needs more of this kind of normal family experience." "You're welcome here any time," Marcus replied, meaning it. "Emma enjoys having other people around. We don't entertain much." Catherine paused in her dish drying, studying Marcus's profile as he washed glasses. "Marcus, can I ask you something personal?" He nodded, curious about what she wanted to know. "What happened with Emma's mother?" "You don't have to answer, if it's too private." Marcus considered the question as he rinsed the last plate. He'd avoided discussing Sarah's departure with most people, partly from privacy and partly from lingering hurt and confusion. "Sarah left when Emma was 5, he said finally. "She said she felt trapped by motherhood and marriage, that she needed to find herself. I think she expected me to fight harder to keep her, but I couldn't force someone to stay who didn't want to be there." Catherine absorbed this information thoughtfully. "That must have been incredibly difficult for both you and Emma." Emma was too young to really understand why Mommy went away and never came back. "I told her that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love, but that it wasn't her fault. And you've been doing this alone ever since." "Emma and I take care of each other," Marcus replied. "It's not always easy, but we manage fine." Catherine's expression held admiration and something deeper that Marcus couldn't quite identify. "You're a remarkable father, Marcus. Emma is lucky to have someone so devoted to her well-being." As the evening wound down and Catherine prepared to leave with Sophie, the little girl hugged Emma goodbye with the fierce affection of instant friendship. "Can Emma come to our house next time?" Sophie asked her mother. "We have a swimming pool and a playroom with lots of art supplies." Catherine looked to Marcus for approval. "If it's all right with Emma's dad, I'd love to have you both over." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "Can we, Dad? Please?" Marcus found himself agreeing, touched by Sophie's eagerness to continue the friendship. As Catherine and Sophie drove away, Emma waved from the front porch until their car disappeared around the corner. "I really like them, Dad," Emma said as they went inside. "Sophie's mom is different from what I expected a rich person to be like." Marcus smiled at his daughter's honest assessment. "How did you expect a rich person to be? I thought they'd be mean or stuck up. But Catherine listens when you talk to her, and she helped with the dishes without complaining. And she laughed at my jokes." "Those are good qualities in a person," Marcus agreed. "Rich or not." That night, as Marcus tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "Dad, do you think Catherine is lonely? She seemed really happy to be here with us." The question caught Marcus unprepared. "What makes you think she might be lonely?" "Just the way she looked when Sophie was talking about their big empty house, and how she said she couldn't remember the last time she had a relaxed evening." Emma's perceptive observation stayed with Marcus as he went to sleep. Over the following weeks, he found himself paying closer attention to Catherine's demeanor during our work interactions. Despite her professional success and obvious competence, there was indeed something almost wistful in her manner when she mentioned family activities or casual social interactions. A month later, Catherine invited Marcus and Emma to Sophie's birthday party at her home. The event revealed the extent of Catherine's wealth in ways that her office and manner hadn't fully conveyed. Her house was a sprawling estate with manicured grounds, a swimming pool that belonged in a resort, and rooms filled with furniture that probably cost more than Marcus's annual salary. But despite the opulent setting, the party felt warm and welcoming. Catherine had invited children from Sophie's school and their families, creating an atmosphere that prioritized fun over formality. Marcus watched Catherine move through her role as hostess with grace and genuine warmth, making sure every child felt included and every parent felt comfortable. "This is incredible," Emma whispered to her father as they toured the house. "Sophie's room is bigger than our whole apartment." "It is pretty amazing," Marcus agreed. "But remember what we've talked about. People aren't better or worse because of how much money they have." Emma nodded solemnly. "I know, Dad. Catherine and Sophie are nice because they're nice people, not because they have a big house." During the party, Marcus found himself in conversation with other parents, most of whom were clearly from Catherine's social and economic circle. To his surprise, they treated him with respect and interest, rather than the condescension he'd half expected. Several mentioned that Catherine had spoken highly of his work and his dedication as a father. "Catherine says you've revolutionized their approach to emergency preparedness," one father mentioned. "That's quite an endorsement coming from her. She doesn't praise easily." As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Catherine approached Marcus with an expression that seemed almost nervous. "Marcus, could I talk to you privately for a minute?" They stepped onto her back patio, while Emma and Sophie played in the pool under the supervision of Catherine's housekeeper. The evening air was warm and pleasant, and the setting sun cast golden light across the perfectly maintained garden. "I have something I want to discuss with you," Catherine began, then paused as if unsure how to proceed. "It's partly business and partly personal." Marcus waited, curious about what had made this confident woman seem uncertain. "My company has been asked to submit a proposal for a major infrastructure project, upgrading emergency systems for the entire metropolitan area. It's a 10-year multi-billion-dollar contract that could transform how this region prepares for and responds to disasters." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "I want you to lead the project. Complete autonomy, unlimited budget for safety improvements, and a salary that would set you and Emma up for life." Marcus felt his breath catch. The scope of what Catherine was describing went far beyond anything he'd imagined when he first accepted her job offer. "That's an incredible opportunity," he said carefully. "But why me? Surely there are people with more experience in large-scale project management." Catherine's smile was warm and confident. "Because you understand that the point of infrastructure isn't to create impressive statistics or photo opportunities. It's to protect people. That night in the parking garage, you didn't calculate cost-benefit ratios or worry about liability issues. You focused on getting everyone home safely." She moved closer, her voice becoming more personal. "Marcus, I've worked with dozens of engineers and emergency specialists over the years. Most of them are technically competent, but they've lost sight of the human element. You never have." The weight of her offer settled on Marcus's shoulders. This wasn't just a career opportunity. It was a chance to implement the kind of comprehensive safety improvements he dreamed about during his military service. There's something else, Catherine continued, her voice softer now. Working together on this project would mean spending a lot of time together. Traveling to different sites, long planning sessions, high-pressure situations. She hesitated, then forged ahead. I want you to know that my interest in working with you isn't purely professional anymore. Marcus studied her face in the fading light, seeing vulnerability beneath her usual composed exterior. Marcus, I know this complicates things, Catherine said quickly, and I understand if you need time to think about it. But I believe we work well together, and I think Emma and Sophie could benefit from having each other in their lives. Before Marcus could respond, the girls' laughter drew their attention back to the pool. Emma was teaching Sophie how to do a handstand in the shallow end, both of them giggling as they tried to maintain their balance. The sight of his daughter so happy and carefree made Marcus's chest tight with emotion. I care about you and Emma a great deal, Catherine said quietly. More than I expected to when I first came to thank you for that rescue. But I don't want to pressure you into anything you're not ready for. Marcus watched his daughter play with Sophie, noting how naturally they had bonded despite their different backgrounds. Emma's laughter rang out across the water, the sound pure and joyful in a way that reminded him how much happiness she was capable of experiencing when given the opportunity. I care about you too, Marcus said finally, turning back to Catherine. You and Sophie have become important to us, but I need to be careful about Emma's well-being. She's been through enough changes and losses. Catherine nodded, understanding clear in her expression. Of course. Emma's security and happiness have to come first. I wouldn't want it any other way. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their daughters play, while each contemplated the implications of the conversation they'd just had. The future that Catherine was offering represented everything Marcus had never dared to hope for himself and Emma. Financial security, meaningful work, and the possibility of a complete family again. But it also represented significant risk. If things didn't work out between him and Catherine, Emma would lose not just Sophie's friendship, but also the stability of the life they'd built together. 2 weeks later, Marcus gave Catherine his answer. They were reviewing safety protocols for a new hospital complex when he brought up their conversation from Sophie's birthday party. I've been thinking about your offer, he said, looking up from the architectural plans spread across the conference table. Both the professional opportunity and the personal aspects. Catherine set down her pen, giving him her complete attention. And? I'd like to take the position leading the infrastructure project, Marcus said. But I think we should keep our personal relationship separate from work, at least initially. Emma needs time to adjust to the changes, and I need to be sure I can handle the increased responsibilities. Catherine's expression showed both happiness and understanding. That sounds very reasonable. The project won't officially begin for another month, which gives us time to plan the transition carefully. Over the following weeks, Marcus began preparing for his new role, while maintaining his careful approach to the developing relationship with Catherine. They continued having family dinners and weekend activities that included both girls, but avoided discussions of long-term commitment that might create pressure or expectations. Emma seemed to thrive in this environment, developing a close friendship with Sophie, while also growing more confident in social situations that exposed her to new experiences and perspectives. Dad, Emma said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner, Sophie asked if we're going to become a real family with her and Catherine. Marcus paused in his dishwashing, recognizing the importance of his response. What did you tell her? I said that we already are a kind of family, but that grown-ups have to make sure about big decisions before they make them permanent. Her 8-year-old wisdom often surprised him. That's exactly right, sweetheart. Catherine and Sophie are very important to us, but we want to make sure everyone's ready before we make any big changes. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I think Catherine makes you happy, Dad. You smile more when she's around. Marcus considered his daughter's observation as he finished the dishes. Emma was right. Catherine did make him happy in ways he'd forgotten were possible. But more than that, she challenged him to be better, to think bigger, to use his capabilities for something more significant than just getting by. The infrastructure project officially launched on a crisp October morning 6 months after the flood that had brought Marcus and Catherine together. Marcus stood in a conference room filled with engineers, city planners, emergency services officials, and politicians, presenting his comprehensive assessment of the region's emergency preparedness needs. Current systems are designed to handle routine maintenance in predictable scenarios, Marcus explained, gesturing to a detailed map showing vulnerable areas throughout the metropolitan region. What we experienced 6 months ago wasn't routine, and climate change means we'll face increasingly unpredictable challenges. Catherine watched from the back of the room as Marcus outlined his recommendations for systematic improvements that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but potentially save thousands of lives. His presentation was thorough, compelling, and delivered with the quiet authority of someone who understood both the technical requirements and the human stakes involved. After the meeting, as officials and contractors discussed implementation timelines and budget allocations, Catherine approached Marcus with obvious pride. "That was masterful," she said quietly. "You had them convinced before you were halfway through." Marcus felt the satisfaction of knowing his work would make a real difference. It helps that the recommendations are based on solid analysis rather than theoretical projections. "And it helps that you understand the human cost of failure," Catherine added. "When you describe potential casualties in concrete terms rather than statistical abstractions, you could see the impact on everyone in the room." As they prepared to leave the meeting, Marcus received a call that changed everything. Emma's school, reporting that she'd been in an accident during recess. A fall from playground equipment that had resulted in a broken arm and possible concussion. Marcus felt his world narrow to a single point of focus as he and Catherine rushed to the hospital. In the emergency room, he found Emma conscious but shaken, her left arm in a temporary splint while doctors completed their evaluation. "Daddy," she said as he knelt beside her hospital bed, "I fell off the monkey bars. It really hurt." Marcus brushed her hair back from her forehead, checking for signs of serious head injury while trying to project calm reassurance. "I know it hurt, sweetheart, but the doctors are going to fix your arm, and you're going to be fine." Catherine appeared at his side with Sophie, who'd insisted on coming to support her friend. "How is she?" Catherine asked quietly. "Broken radius, mild concussion," Marcus reported. "She'll need a cast for 6 weeks, but no surgery required." As they waited for Emma's treatment to be completed, Marcus found himself reflecting on how natural it felt to have Catherine and Sophie there with them. This was what family support looked like. People who showed up during emergencies, who shared both the worry and the relief, who understood that a child's injury was everyone's concern. "Mr. Thompson?" The doctor approached with Emma's x-rays and treatment plan. "The break is clean and should heal completely with proper care. We'll need to see her again in 2 weeks to check the cast placement." During Emma's recovery, Catherine and Sophie became daily fixtures in their routine. Catherine adjusted her work schedule to help with school pickup and activities that Marcus couldn't manage with his demanding project timeline. Sophie appointed herself as Emma's entertainment committee, bringing art supplies and books to their apartment and helping her friend adapt to the limitations of a cast. "This is what partnerships look like," Catherine told Marcus one evening as they watched the girls work on a puzzle together on the living room floor. "People taking care of each other when life gets complicated." Marcus nodded, recognizing the truth in her observation. "I've spent so long being self-sufficient that I forgot what it was like to have someone to share the load." "You've never been just self-sufficient," Catherine corrected gently. "You've been heroic. But even heroes need support systems." 2 months later, Marcus was reviewing final preparations for the first major infrastructure upgrade when Catherine approached his office with an expression he'd learned to recognize as important news. "I've been offered a position," she said, sitting down across from his desk. "Regional Director for a Federal Emergency Management Initiative." It would mean overseeing disaster preparedness for 6 states. Marcus looked up from his plans, immediately understanding the significance of what she was telling him. "That's an incredible opportunity. You'd be able to implement the kind of systematic changes we've been working toward on a much larger scale." Catherine nodded, but her expression remained serious. "It would also mean relocating to Denver and traveling extensively throughout the region." The implications of her announcement settled between them like a physical presence. "When would you need to decide?" Marcus asked. "They want an answer within 2 weeks, and if I accept, I'd need to start within a month." Marcus studied Catherine's face, trying to read her feelings about the offer. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that this is exactly the kind of work I've always wanted to do," Catherine said honestly. "Comprehensive, systematic, focused on protecting people rather than generating profits." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "But I'm also thinking that leaving would mean losing what we've built here. You, Emma, this relationship that's become the most important thing in my life." The confession hung between them, carrying weight that both recognized as transformative. They were no longer discussing a professional opportunity. They were confronting the reality of what they meant to each other, and what they were willing to sacrifice or risk to stay together. "There's something else," Catherine continued. "They've asked me to recommend someone to head the technical implementation team, someone with your background and expertise." Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he grasped what she was suggesting. "They'd want me to relocate too?" "If you were interested, the position would involve designing and implementing emergency preparedness systems across multiple states. It's exactly the kind of work you've proven you excel at." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing the magnitude of what Catherine was proposing. Moving to Denver would mean leaving the life he'd carefully built for Emma, abandoning the stability and predictability that had been his primary goals since becoming a single father. But it would also mean pursuing work that could save thousands of lives, while maintaining the relationship that had become central to both his and Emma's happiness. "I'd need to discuss it with Emma," Marcus said finally. "This affects her as much as it affects me." Catherine nodded. "Of course. And, Marcus, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it completely. I won't take the position if it means losing you and Emma." That evening, Marcus sat down with his daughter to discuss the possibility of moving to Denver. He explained the job opportunity in terms she could understand, emphasizing both the exciting aspects and the challenges of starting over in a new city. "Would Sophie and Catherine come too?" Emma asked immediately. "Yes, we'd all move together if we decide to do it." Emma considered this information with characteristic seriousness. "Would I have to change schools?" "Yes, but you'd go to a really good school and you'd make new friends." "But I'd miss my friends here," Emma said wistfully. "And Mrs. Rodriguez." Marcus acknowledged her concerns while helping her think through the implications. Moving is always hard because you have to leave familiar things behind, but it also means new adventures and opportunities. Emma was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing the pros and cons with 8-year-old logic. "Dad, would this job make you happy?" The directness of her question caught Marcus off guard. "I think it would. It's the kind of work I've always wanted to do." "And Catherine would be happy too?" "Yes, I think she would be." Emma nodded decisively. "Then we should do it. Mrs. Rodriguez always says that when good people have chances to help more people, they should take them." Once again, his daughter's wisdom humbled Marcus. Over the next week, he and Catherine discussed the practical aspects of relocating while continuing to work together on their current projects. They talked about schools for the girls, housing options, and the logistics of managing a long-distance move. But underlying all these practical considerations was the deeper question of what this decision meant for their relationship. "Are we ready for this?" Catherine asked one evening as they reviewed real estate listings online. "Moving across the country together?" Marcus considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, I would have said absolutely not. The risk would have seemed too great." "And now?" "Now I think the risk of not taking this opportunity might be greater. For both of us and for the girls." Catherine smiled, relief evident in her expression. "I feel the same way. This feels like the next step we're supposed to take together." 2 weeks later, Marcus submitted his resignation from the city water department and accepted the federal position in Denver. Catherine formally accepted her regional director role, and both families began the process of preparing for relocation. Emma approached the move with excitement, tempered by natural anxiety about leaving familiar surroundings. Sophie, more accustomed to change due to Catherine's previous career demands, helped her friend see the adventure aspects of starting over in a new place. The transition process brought Marcus and Catherine closer together as they navigated the complex logistics of coordinating 2 career changes and relocating 2 families simultaneously. They found themselves making decisions together that felt naturally collaborative, consulting each other on everything from housing choices to school selections to timing concerns. "We're pretty good at this," Catherine observed one evening as they finalized moving arrangements. "At what?" Marcus asked. "Being a team. Making decisions together. Supporting each other through stressful situations." Marcus smiled, recognizing the truth in her assessment. "We've had good practice with crisis management." 3 months later, Marcus stood in his new office in downtown Denver, looking out at the Rocky Mountains while reviewing implementation plans for emergency preparedness systems across 6 states. The scope of his responsibilities was larger than anything he'd previously imagined, but he felt equipped to handle the challenges through a combination of his technical expertise and the confidence that came from Catherine's partnership. Their new house was larger than anything either family had previously lived in, with separate bedrooms for the girls and space for the home offices that both Marcus and Catherine needed for their demanding positions. But more than the physical space, the house felt like a true family home in ways that neither of their previous living situations had achieved. "Dad," Emma said one evening as they sat on their new back porch watching the sunset over the mountains, "do you miss our old house?" Marcus considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the familiarity of it, but I like our new life better." "Me too," Emma said contentedly. "Sophie and I have the best playroom ever, and Catherine makes really good pancakes." Marcus smiled at his daughter's assessment of their improved circumstances. 6 months into their new life in Denver, Catherine approached Marcus with a proposal that surprised him, despite their increasingly integrated relationship. "I've been thinking about us," she said one evening after the girls had gone to bed, "about where we're headed and what we want for our family." Marcus looked up from the reports he'd been reviewing, giving Catherine his complete attention. "What kind of thinking?" Catherine moved to sit beside him on the couch, her expression serious but warm. "The kind where I realize that what we have is exactly what I want for the rest of my life. You, Emma, Sophie, this partnership we've built together." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Marcus, I'm asking you to marry me." The proposal caught Marcus completely off guard, though he realized it shouldn't have. Their relationship had evolved steadily toward permanent commitment, and Catherine's directness was consistent with her personality and their communication style. "Catherine," he began, then stopped, overwhelmed by the mix of emotions her proposal had triggered. "I know it's unconventional for the woman to propose," Catherine continued, "but I also know what I want, and I don't want to wait for social conventions when I could be building the future I want with the person I love." Marcus set aside his work and took Catherine's hands in his. "It's not unconventional that bothers me. It's the feeling that I don't have anything to offer you that you don't already have." Catherine's expression softened. "Marcus, you saved my life. You've given me a family, a partner, a sense of purpose that goes beyond professional success. You've shown Sophie what it means to have a father who puts family first." She paused, her voice becoming more emotional. "You've given me love that I didn't even know I was missing." Marcus studied Catherine's face, seeing vulnerability and strength combined in her expression. "You've changed my life too. You've given Emma opportunities I never could have provided, and you've shown me that it's possible to have both meaningful work and personal happiness." He squeezed her hands gently. "Yes, Catherine, I'll marry you." Their engagement announcement was met with enthusiasm from colleagues and friends, but the most important reactions came from Emma and Sophie. The girls had suspected the possibility for months, and greeted the news with excited planning for the wedding ceremony and their official status as sisters. "Finally," Sophie declared when Marcus and Catherine told them about their engagement, "now we can be a real family." "We already were a real family," Emma corrected. "Now we just get to have a party to celebrate it." The wedding took place 6 months later in a small ceremony attended by close friends and colleagues. Marcus's military buddies served as groomsmen, while Catherine's business associates and the girls from Sophie's school filled out the guest list. Emma and Sophie served as joint maids of honor, taking their responsibilities seriously while clearly enjoying their central role in the celebration. During his wedding vows, Marcus spoke about the night he pulled Catherine from the flooded parking garage, never imagining that saving her life would lead to finding his own happiness. Catherine, in her vows, talked about learning that true success meant building something meaningful with people you love, rather than accumulating achievements that left you isolated. As they exchanged rings, with Emma and Sophie standing beside them as witnesses, Marcus felt the profound satisfaction of knowing that every risk he'd taken, every decision to trust and be vulnerable, had led to this moment of complete happiness. 2 years after the wedding, Marcus was reviewing regional emergency preparedness statistics when he received a call that brought their story full circle. A massive storm system was approaching the Denver metropolitan area, bringing the potential for flooding that could rival what they'd experienced in Riverside. "All emergency systems are activated," Catherine reported from her regional command center. "But Marcus, the predictions show this could be the test of everything we've built here." Marcus looked out his office window at the darkening sky, remembering another storm night when his life had changed completely. "Then we'll find out if our work has been good enough." The storm that hit Denver that night was indeed the test that revealed the effectiveness of the emergency preparedness systems Marcus had designed and implemented. Advanced warning systems gave residents time to evacuate vulnerable areas. Redundant pumping systems prevented the kind of catastrophic flooding that had trapped Catherine and Sophie years earlier. Emergency response protocols functioned exactly as planned, with coordination between agencies that had never existed before Marcus's systematic approach to crisis management. By morning, the storm had passed with minimal casualties and property damage, despite its intensity. Marcus stood in the emergency command center, surrounded by colleagues and officials who understood that the night's success represented years of careful planning and systematic preparation. Outstanding work, the regional FEMA director told Marcus as damage reports confirmed their success. Your systems prevented what could have been a catastrophic disaster. Catherine approached Marcus as the command center began transitioning from emergency response to recovery operations. You did it, she said quietly. You built something that actually works when people need it most. Marcus felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that his life's work had achieved its intended purpose. But more than professional validation, he felt gratitude for the journey that had brought him to this moment. The scared single father who had pulled a stranger from floodwater had become someone capable of protecting entire communities from disaster. We did it, Marcus corrected, acknowledging Catherine's partnership in both his personal and professional success. Together. That evening, as they sat on their back porch watching Emma and Sophie play in the yard, Catherine reflected on how completely their lives had been transformed since that stormy night in Riverside. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been in that parking garage that night? She asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. Sometimes, but I think we would have found each other eventually. People who are meant to be together usually find a way. Emma approached them carrying a school assignment she'd completed about heroes in her community. She'd written about her father, describing how he'd saved people during a flood and then worked to make sure floods couldn't hurt people anymore. My dad says that real heroes are people who help others even when it's dangerous or difficult, Emma had written. He saved my mom from drowning. And then he saved lots of other people by making our whole city safer. But the best thing he ever did was teach me that helping people is the most important thing anyone can do. As Marcus read his daughter's words, he felt the profound contentment that came from knowing that every choice he'd made, every risk he'd taken, had led to this moment of complete happiness. The flood that had brought Catherine into his life had been a moment of crisis that revealed character. But the real story had been everything that came after. The slow building of trust, the careful integration of two families, the professional partnership that amplified both their capabilities, and the love that had grown from shared values and mutual respect. Sophie ran over to show them a drawing she'd made of their family house, complete with all four of them standing in the front yard under a rainbow. Look, she said proudly. It's our house after the storm. The rainbow means everything is going to be beautiful. Marcus and Catherine exchanged a look that communicated years of shared experience and future hopes. They had indeed found their rainbow after the storm, built through courage, trust, and the decision to risk everything for the possibility of finding something better than either had imagined possible. As the sun set behind the mountains and their daughters played happily in the security of the life they'd all built together, Marcus Thompson reflected on the truth that real heroism wasn't about dramatic rescues or emergency responses. It was about the daily choice to show up for the people you love, to use your abilities in service of something larger than yourself, and to remain open to the possibility that saving someone else might be the first step toward saving yourself.